welcome. The Books of Magic is a series of Vertigo Comics titles centered around the character Tim Hunter. Tim is a bespectacled British teen who has the potential to be the greatest magician in the world, if he so chooses. He also has the potential to be the largest threat to the world, should he choose that path instead. One can't help but immediately notice the similarity between Tim Hunter and the other really famous boy magician, Harry Potter. For the record, Tim Hunter predates Harry Potter by 7 years. Of course, this similarity makes one wonder why DC, the owner of the Vertigo imprint, didn't pursue legal action against J.K. Rowling for plagiarism. Well, there are a few reasons why this didn't occur. For one, Warner Brothers, the multimedia empire, not only owns the film rights to Harry Potter, but they also own DC. So, any talk of legal action from DC would have been shut down immediately to avoid any interference with the movie franchise. One could also suggest that Warner Brothers were offered the rights to the movie property to avoid any legal entanglements should anyone mention the similarities between Tim and Harry. However, that is simply speculation. The other possibly more relevant reason is that a boy magician isn't exactly a unique concept. Furthermore, it's not simply the idea itself, it's what one does with it that makes it unique. So in that respect, Tim Hunter and Harry Potter are quite dissimilar. They mostly look the same, which is both coincidental and trivial, but they develop in vastly different directions. So a claim of plagiarism is, at best, flimsy and insubstantial. The 4-part miniseries from 1990 was originally going to be written by Jim DeMatteis, and according to DeMatteis, the original artists were going to be John J. Muth, Kent Williams, and Dave McKean. For unknown reasons, the artists pulled out of the project as it was being developed, and when this occurred, DeMatteis also pulled out. The writing assignment then went to Neil Gaiman, with the art duties going to John Bolton, Scott Hampton, Charles Vess, and Paul Johnson, all of whom did amazing work and were an appropriate choice for the chapter they illustrated. The story itself is straightforward. Tim Hunter is given the opportunity to either choose magic or to reject it and live a simpler, happier life. In order to help Tim decide his future, he's given a guided tour of magic in the DC Universe. His tour guides are Phantom Stranger, John Constantine, Dr. Occult, and Mr. E. Tim is shown the past, present, and future of magic, as well as a tour of the magical side realms in the DC Universe. He sees the positive and negative aspects of magic and its uses. At the end of this magical mystery tour, Tim decides to reject magic. However, he changes his mind a moment later, but it is too late. The decision has already been made. In fact, the plot twist of the story is that Tim agreeing to take the tour in the first place was all the consent necessary for magic to become a part of his life. So, regardless of what he decided at the end of the tour, he was going to become a magician. This miniseries lays the foundation for all the magical elements in the DC Universe. In a way, it ties all of these various fantastical elements together into a loose but cohesive whole. That is the point of the miniseries, really. It provides the context and establishes the rules, so to speak, of Tim Hunter's future in the DC Universe. However, by the time Books of Magic became a series in 1994, it was published under the newly established Vertigo imprint. This basically nullified the foundation work done in the original miniseries, since the Vertigo titles existed on their own, outside of the regular DC universe. Prior to the Books of Magic becoming a series, there was another notable miniseries in the development of the life of Tim Hunter, and this was the 4-part mystery miniseries from 1991. During the original Books of Magic miniseries, Mystery took it upon himself to try and kill Tim Hunter. Since Tim could turn out to be either a force for good or evil, Mystery decided it was expedient to murder Tim and remove any ambiguity concerning his potential. Of course, Tim survived this attempt on his life, and Mystery was subsequently stranded billions of years in the future. This 1991 Mystery miniseries picks up directly after the end of the Books of Magic miniseries and charts Mystery's journey back to the present time to finish the job he started. Along the way, his backstory and motivations are filled in, and we're given a good understanding of Mystery's psychopathic devotion to eradicating evil. When Mystery does finally arrive in the present time, Tim is unable to adequately defend himself despite the training he received from Zatanna. Ultimately, Mystery decides not to kill Tim. After this act of mercy, Mystery wanders away, right into comic book obscurity. From there, Tim Hunter next shows up in the first and only Vertigo crossover series, the Children'S Crusade. In the Arcana Annual, many of the elements that would be the basis for the ongoing Books of Magic series are introduced. Most notably, the fact that the fairy dimension is in a state of decay. This element would be the through line for a major portion of the ongoing series. Shortly after the Children'S Crusade, Tim Hunter would get a proper, ongoing series. The first 50 issues of this 75-issue series were written by John Nay Ryber, with a rotating series of artists. The stories by Ryber are somewhat uneven, as one would expect from an ongoing monthly title. And, in my opinion, the series mostly wanders, looking for an interesting direction to pursue. This is basically exemplified by the stories themselves, as Tim Hunter leaves home during the second year of the series and travels around America. At the same time, the series also spends a fair amount of time focusing on Molly, Tim's sort of girlfriend. Molly becomes trapped in the fairy realm, gets cursed by the fairy queen, and she ends up causing a fair amount of mayhem in that world. In an interview with the Comics Journal, Ryber admits that given the opportunity, he would have focused the series on those around Tim Hunter, rather than on the boy mage himself. This is quite noticeable in the series, as significant portions are spent with the supporting cast, filling in their lives and setting up conflicts Tim would have to resolve. Further in the series, this approach becomes even more noticeable. It's almost as if Ryber was trying to avoid developing Tim at all. The most significant development in the series is the concept of Tim as an opener, which means he's someone who is capable of making his fantasies real. That is, his fantasies manifest in the real world. In fact, he subconsciously created an entire side realm inhabited with imaginary friends from his childhood. The overall theme of Ryber's run is that investing into the fantasy one finds attractive is ultimately a destructive venture. There will always be a cost, and it will most certainly be higher than one expects. At the end of Ryber's run, Tim decides the price that he has been paying is too much. He completely rids himself of magic, sending it out into the world. The artist, Peter Gross, who had illustrated a good portion of the first 50 issues, stepped in as the writer for the series until it concluded with the 75th issue. Gross would incorporate and expand upon a fair amount of the elements Ryber introduced. In essence, Gross takes all of the loosely developed elements and characters from Ryber's time on the title, and he weaves them together into a coherent whole. Of course, Gross had to find a way to restore Tim Hunter's magic, and, basically, that plot occupies the series until its conclusion. The final portion of the ongoing series is very well grounded. While filled with fantastical elements and mythology, as one would expect, it flows organically, and it feels like it has an actual direction. Tim Hunter is definitely the focal point, and he evolves into someone who accepts the responsibility of his fate. Not only that, but he accepts the harm he's caused by initially avoiding accepting this responsibility. In other words, Tim matures from a reckless boy into a young adult. As an endpoint for the first series, it seems quite appropriate. Originally, Gross had planned to continue with the series after a brief pause. He wanted there to be a bit of a break in the series so that Tim could be aged up a few years. But by the time Gross neared the end of the story he started, he was a little burnt out and decided to move away from the series. The Books of Magic series officially concluded with the 75th issue and paused, like Gross had previously planned. It returned 6 months later with the new title, The Names of Magic. This 5-issue, limited series was intended to be a bridge between the original series and a new, ongoing series. That new ongoing series was Hunter, the Age of Magic, which began in 2001. This title would only last 25 issues before being cancelled. The only significant contribution it made to the Tim Hunter saga was he was aged up. Although, to be fair, the opening arc wasn't all that engaging, so I skimmed the rest of the series looking for further developments. If there were any, it's quite possible I missed them. This series was followed in 2004 with Books of Magic, Life During Wartime. The story occurs on 2 different worlds. On one world, John Constantine and Zatanna are losing a war with a fairy queen. Tim Hunter, now a young man, is on another world, living a relatively sedate life, surrounded by people who are suspiciously devoted to him. Life During Wartime would only last 15 issues, and it wraps up rather quickly. This rushed conclusion is likely due to it being cancelled. Regardless, the series does get Tim Hunter to a point where his education is now done. He's finally ready to take on the role he's been preparing for since the original 1990 miniseries. Unfortunately, this would be the end of Tim Hunter's journey. As an imprint, Vertigo Comics had become a niche, and new titles struggled to find an audience. At some point, it was decided that all former DC Universe characters, such as John Constantine, Black Orchid, and Zatanna, would be permanently returned to the mainstream DC continuity. Of course, Tim Hunter was one of these returned characters. In 2011, Tim Hunter would get a new 52 makeover within the pages of Justice League Dark. Tim's origin, so to speak, remains somewhat intact, although his guides on the original journey are changed to Constantine, Zatanna, and Madame Xanadu, another character that had been reclaimed from Vertigo Comics into mainstream DC continuity. Regardless, these are mostly forgettable appearances, not because of the story, but because this version of Tim would not be seen again once the Death of Magic storyline in Justice League Dark concluded. In an effort to revitalize the Vertigo Comics imprint, a series of Sandman Universe titles were launched in 2018. One such title was a new version of the Books of Magic, starring another new version of Tim Hunter. Tim's origin is restored back to the original 1990 miniseries, and this new series picks up immediately after those events. Seemingly, the events in all the prior Vertigo series, and all of the new 52 appearances, are wiped clean, although this new series retains some of the elements previously established. For example, Tim's father is missing an arm, and he spends his days watching TV. Tim's mother is missing. Tim himself has the potential to be a great evil or a force for good. Also included is the concept that using magic comes with a cost. However, the character of Tim is dramatically different. He's no longer a sullen teen who feels burdened by the responsibility of his future. He now openly embraces magic, and he actively pursues his own potential. This change feels very Harry Potter-like. Furthermore, the title, Books of Magic, is taken literally. That is, Tim's mission, so to speak, is to find and read books about magic in order to learn his craft. Tim's guide and protector, at the end of protector, is Rose, the female version of Dr. Occult. So far, this new series is very easy to digest, and it's definitely targeted toward a young adult audience. It's a title still in the early stages of development, so its future has yet to be determined. That's it for today. Like, share, subscribe, and comment, and I will talk at you later. Until next time.